Hi, welcome to Marijuana Politics. I'm Romain Bonilla, and we're here at the 2016 International Cannabis Business Conference in San Francisco. I'm joined here with Andrew Sullivan. He's an award-winning author and journalist who is the author of 6 books and a big political commentator. So thank you for joining us.
You're so welcome, Roman.
So how long have you been involved in the movement for marijuana reform?
Well, as a writer, I've supported legalization since I was, first wrote. But I think that my own activism or concern about it kind of intensified during the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and early 90s when my friends were dying and the medications that they were taking were almost impossible for them to tolerate. And cannabis saved their lives. And I had never smoked cannabis. I never did anything till I was 36. But I saw immediately that any law that prevented my friends from surviving a fatal illness was evil and irrational and crazy. And the only reason they were doing it is because they might feel a little happier, even as they were feeling less nauseous, even if they were able to tolerate. And this incredible stigma against people being happy, which runs deep in American society, of course. It's a very puritanical society in some ways. It's actually an extremely schizophrenic society on all of that stuff, as you know. But that's what was the turning point for me. But I'd always philosophically, as a libertarian, conservative, never had a problem with it. I mean, I'd always been in favor of it, but I hadn't proactively supported it.
Well, that's certainly a unique perspective. A whole lot of people have different reasons for joining the movement, and that's definitely a compelling argument. So you've been blogging for years. I've been reading your blog religiously for many, many years. But recently you put an end to your blogging career. Why is that, and what are you working on right now?
I don't think people realize when they read it that putting out 40 posts a day for 15 years and having to keep your eyes and tabs on everything going on in the world every day is exciting, but in the end, physically and humanly impossible to sustain. And we had a fantastic 15-year run of doing that every day. And I felt that my mind, my brain was getting rewired for momentary reactions and hot takes and constant distraction. And there were things I wanted to think about that required space and time. And I wanted to have some time to read some real books and to think again and to actually restore my health, because the stress of doing that was killing me after a long time. So I've spent a year attempting to sort of rebuild my mental, spiritual, and physical health. And I'm now working on 2 books. One is on the future of Christianity.
That's fascinating.
So actually there's one little part of the book is really about how cannabis and psilocybin have been really important parts of my own faith life. People always regard these things as antithetical to religion or to spirituality, whereas of course nothing could be further from the truth. And that's what human beings use this for millennia. And so that's a tiny sliver of the book, but I want to try and, as a believing Christian, I want to reintroduce Jesus to people who've only heard the worst and the most awful descriptions of Christianity. And I figure like a gay man like me who survived HIV might be able to might get a hearing about what Christianity really needs to be about and what it really is. And the current Pope has also given us an opening to redescribe Christianity in a more accepting, tolerant, open, and beautiful way, in a way that it has become so divorced from in recent years.
That's very interesting. What do you think Jesus' take on marijuana policy would be right now?
I never ever answer questions like that about what Jesus would do, because I have no, I don't, I know my own conscience tells me that when I disappear off to the end of the dunes on Cape Cod in the summer, and I've had a little bit of joint, and I sit and I pray and meditate and observe beauty, that this is an avenue towards understanding God, not a path away, and that's the only thing that should matter for a Christian.
That's interesting. So let's talk about the presidential election. Right now we are getting close to one of the biggest elections in recent history. Do you think a Hillary Clinton presidency is inevitable?
No.
Why is that?
Because she's one of the worst candidates to run for president in Michael Dukakis. I mean, she's just one of the least talented, least able, least charismatic, least inspiring people, and she has no real compelling message, and she still doesn't. And she's being beaten by a 74-year-old socialist from Vermont, and it's, at some point you just have to acknowledge she's no good. Now, obviously, everything depends on what happens on the other side as well. And also, possibly, may well be or could be indicted for sloppy use of classified information. So I don't know. I mean, everybody's been surprised so far. I couldn't vote for any single one of these people on either side. I think they're all about the worst selection of candidates I've seen in many, many years, and I want Obama to have a third term, but he's not allowed by the Constitution, unfortunately. But no, I don't think she's inevitable at all. In fact, I think it's quite likely she'll lose.
What do you think is the reason why Bernie Sanders has drawn such momentum, particularly from young people?
Because he stands for something. I mean, he believes in something. He has a clear message, and it's actually a message tailored to the moment. She stands for nothing, and she has no message. So at some point, people respond to that. And she is such a, I mean, she is such a part of the system, so much part of the establishment. I mean, she's having Christmases in resorts with the Kissingers and the De Laurentas. I mean, this is not the election in which people want to vote for someone like her. And Sanders, you know, there's an authenticity to him, I think, that people respect, even though I think he's stuck in 1975 and has never really changed his mind about anything since. And I find him a totally implausible president myself. But I think he's been just an instrument to reveal how profoundly weak a candidate she is.
On the Republican side, which candidate do you think is the most reasonable?
John Kasich.
Okay, why is that?
He actually has some connection with reality. He seems to have some acknowledgement that the economy is not a disaster in this country, that in fact, if you wanted to be a country right now in the world, the United States is probably better positioned than almost any other one, given, and I think he's prepared to deal with Democrats. He took the Medicaid expansion in his own state of Ohio. He's someone you can talk to, which is why he has no chance at all.
That's a cynical perspective.
No, it's a thoroughly realistic.
Sure.
I mean, it's borne out by the results. The Republican voters in the Republican primary, they've become detached from anything remotely applicable to the real world. And that's especially true internationally, but it's also true domestically.
Who do you think among the Republican candidates has the best chance of defeating a Democrat in the general election?
Trump.
Why is that?
Because he's clearly very skilled at politics, because he's tapped into the feeling right now. I mean, look, Sanders is saying the whole system is corrupt. I will overcome it by getting small donations from lots of individual people. I won't have a super PAC. I'm not part of this establishment. And Trump is saying exactly the same thing. I'm not corrupt. I won't, because I have so much shitload of money, no one can buy me. However, when you look at Trump's proposal, which is a massive tax giveaway to the extraordinary wealthy, it doesn't add up at all to what he's actually appealing to. And the trade war that he wants to start would actually terribly impoverish people, even though they don't realize it. But we're in a strange moment. He has a huge amount of charisma. One possibility is if he faces Clinton in the fall, there will be moments in the debates when he actually has to explain what he might want to do and how, which so far the press shamefully has not pressed him on. I will deport 12 million people. No one said how. Like, what would that require? What agencies would you use? How many people would it take? You know, it's a pure fantasy candidacy. But so there's a chance in the fall when he's forced to actually spell it out that he could implode. But he's likeliest, I think, at this point. Cruz, conceivably, but I think, I mean, you know, no one's been right so far. A year ago, I will say, I predicted Cruz to be the nominee, but I didn't really expect Trump to come in, because they are further to their extreme than they've been in, and they keep upping the ante.
Of both major parties, which candidate do you think has the best ideas when it comes to drug policy?
Rand Paul. I'm just trying to think. I think Ted Cruz has some potential, oddly enough, in terms of criminal justice reform. I think Clinton will be terrible on drug policy. She's that generation. Sanders would be okay. But alas, you know, someone like Chris Christie or even Donald Trump, it's not promising.
So we've had a lot of talk about big campaign donors during this election. Wall Street, health companies, you know, big oil, but private prison companies and big pharma are also big donors and very invested in some of the candidates. Why do you think they donate to those candidates, and how do you think that relates to those candidates' drug policy?
I'm not a believer that, you know, there's sort of intrinsic corruption on a sort of pay-to-play mold. It's not that kind of corruption. It is more just an environment that's created in which politicians operate, in which certain things are slowly, subtly, without any particular reason, off limits. I don't think the private prison industry or big pharma. I'm much more concerned about big alcohol than I am about big pharma. Pharma, you know, if the potential for using this material for drugs and for sophisticated drugs of a whole variety is a potential big winner for big pharma. But beer, not so much. Especially if, you know, somewhere like Colorado can show a decline in drunk driving deaths. If we can prove the substitution argument, then we are leading to a much healthier and safer society. But again, at the same time, we're living in a period of incredibly low crime rates, which, you know, is again good for us.
Of the other candidates outside of the major parties, we've recently had news that Gary Johnson had launched his presidential campaign as a Libertarian candidate. What do you think he'll be able to contribute to the discussion of drug policy?
Not much, to be honest. I think Gary Johnson, for all his great thing, is easily dismissed, and he's been dismissed in the past. And I think the whole concept of waiting for a politician to save us is the wrong strategy. Certainly in the marriage equality movement I was talking about, we had no politicians on our side for like 15 to 20 years. I mean, in fact, we were anathema to them. You have to learn that no president, no politician is going to save your ass. You're only going to do this from the bottom up. What you do is you shift the context culturally, politically, intellectually in a way that they will then respond to those signals, which we've successfully done and we need to do more of. But that's what happens. It's slowly, you shift the climate and these fucking politicians slowly adjust. And you know, that's what we found on marriage all the way through. And then the worst politicians come in at the very last minute, like Hillary Clinton.
Now let's talk.
Just a terrible human being that should never be elected president of the United States. I might as well just throw that in while I'm at it.
That certainly sounds like an honest opinion.
It is. It's an honest opinion that's based upon years of coverage of these people. I mean, I was editor of the New Republic for the first term of the first Clinton administration, so I saw them up close. What they did on prisons, what they did on gay people, what they did on immigration. These people are reactionaries and opportunists. And they certainly would be I think they'd be worse for marijuana legalization.
Worse than some of the tough on crime Republicans?
Yeah, because maybe not. I mean, but because they want to credentialize themselves with the right. They're always trying to prove they're not really left liberals, and they still have this mindset of people in their 60s and 70s that somehow this will credentialize. And the way they were the worst administration for gay people in this country because they were credentializing themselves with the right.
That makes sense. So as a fellow European, what is your insight on when the UK might be starting to reform its marijuana laws?
You know, I'm out of touch with the UK on that subject. I'm kind of shocked that they don't seem to be more advanced than they are. And some of the arguments that come up when I talk about it strike me as lame. Like the one thing that comes up most common is it's way much more powerful than it used to be, and people are going to, the entire generation is going to become schizophrenics. I mean, that has become, and it doesn't help that the English are terrible when it comes to intoxicants. But if any country could do with less beer drinking and more pot smoking, it would be England, which has a huge health problem with drinking. It's a country of functioning alcoholics, and on the other hand, they have they have that amazing guy, David Nutt, that has really spoken truth to power. The role I would like to play there, if I ever did again, would be to try and persuade the Conservative Party to get its act together on this, just as they did on marriage equality. Like, people forget that it was the Conservative government that legislated gay marriage in Britain, not a Labour one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to marijuana reform in Europe right now?
Don't know enough to tell you that.
Okay, fair.
To be honest.
So over the next 10 years, what do you think the world of marijuana policy is going to look like? How is that going to go forward?
Look, I think what happens is you seem to be going uphill slowly. I'm thinking about my experience in the marriage equality movement and not foreseeing the future and not being able to know what the future is. But what you aim for is a consistent, relentless, reasoned argument with people and an engagement with people on a serious level. I think you have to get past the giggle factor. You have to get past the ick factor. You have to come out of the closet. We have to have more simple, sensible conversations about this in public. And you'd be surprised, and the younger generation is obviously with us. You'd be surprised how quickly change can come. I mean, look, if Canada and California have legal weed by the end of this year, that's a huge thing. I mean, California is, you know, I don't know, what is it, the 6th biggest economy or something? It's huge. And Canada is, so you have this huge frame of the United States. And I live in Washington, D.C., and that's where I live, and it's perfectly legal, even though the Congress is fucking us over. It's perfectly legal, and that's the great thing. As with marriage in the States, you kind of diffuse the fears by doing it and showing nothing happens, and then you get more confidence on a national, international level. But I think, you know, the stuff that's going on in Latin America is also very interesting right now. I'm cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, we're in this very volatile populist era, and populists, right-wing populists, don't like people having fun.
That's a shame. Where can we find out more? Where can viewers find out more about the work that you're doing right now?
Well, I've just been on a year-long sabbatical. My blog's still up there if you want to read it. 15 years of it. My books, Virtually Normal, Love Undetectable, The Conservative Soul, and I'm working on, as I said, a book about the future of Christianity, and I'm actually putting out a collection of my essays, which should be out next year. So that's where I'm at right now.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Roman, very nice to meet you.
Yeah,
thanks. You bet.